Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to the 8th meeting of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Axial Spondyloarthritis. I'm delighted to welcome you here this afternoon to our meeting, which will be exploring the critical role of specialist physiotherapy care. I'm Tom Randall. I'm the Member of Parliament for Gedling and also the Chair of the APPG on Axial Spondyloarthritis. And as many of you here today will know, including for sure, I'm sure many of you through personal experience, physiotherapy care can play an absolutely vital role in the management of axial SPA. And indeed, I can speak from my own experience on the role that a physio can play. I know that for many, it can represent the difference between being able to manage or not manage discomfort and flare-ups that you might experience. Now, today we're going to explore this area in the knowledge that the APPG's inquiry from 2019 to 2020 found that a fifth of NHS services were not able to provide access to a specialist rheumatology physiotherapist for those with axial SPA. And this is despite key national clinical guidance from NICE recommending that everyone with a diagnosis of axial SPA is referred to a specialist physiotherapist for a structured exercise programme. So the implication, therefore, is that many with axial SPA are missing out on one of the most important ways of managing their condition and are suffering unnecessarily because of it. So today we're going to hear from 5 fantastic speakers who are going to provide us with a range of expert perspectives in 3 core areas. They are why the right physiotherapy care is so important for our condition, what the current challenges are in getting that care to those who need it, and what the potential shoots of hope do we have in working to address those challenges. Now, as always at these meetings, following the presentations, we're going to move into a group discussion, which will give attendees an opportunity to put questions to our speakers. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a Q&A button. So you can pop all your questions. If you've got questions for the group discussion, pop them into the Q&A box and we'll pick those up later. And also, please do note, as you've probably seen from the red light in the corner of the screen, this meeting is being recorded this afternoon, so it's available for those who aren't able to join today. So just bear that in mind as well. But before we move on to the first of our presentations, I just wanted to briefly run through what the APPG has planned for the rest of the year. It's May already. I don't quite know how we got this far so quickly. But one of the key areas the group will progress is the delivery of a second national audit report to help build a clearer real-time picture of the state of play in axial SPA care across the NHS. And that report will establish how the delivery of key areas of care has changed since the group's previous report. And we hope will provide to decision makers valuable insights to support planning at both national and local levels. And these findings will be brought forward to the next meeting of the group in autumn, and we look forward to sharing updates with you as that project moves forward. We also plan to host, in partnership with NAS, a reception event in Parliament towards the end of the year, and that event will support us in looking back on the considerable ground that we've covered as a group since the first meeting in 2019, as well as providing a moment to cast our gaze ahead on the key priorities we still need to work towards addressing. I hope that I'll be able to see as many of you there as possible. It'll be very nice to see some of you in the flesh rather than on a computer screen. And I know that NAS will be sharing details of that event a little nearer the time. But without any further delay, I'd be delighted to welcome our first speaker, which is Roger Stevens, who will be providing us with his own experiences of accessing specialist physiotherapy care and the importance and the impact that doing so has had. So over to you, Roger.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Roger Stevens, and I'm going to say a few words about the value of specialist physiotherapists in treating AS and axial SPA patients and why we and our support groups believe this is so important. A little background first. I was diagnosed with AS at the Royal Naval Hospital at Haslar in 1991-92, although I'd had symptoms for some time beforehand. However, my first experience of physiotherapy in a specialist nature was following major leg reconstruction surgeries and operations in Oxford in the late 60s and early 70s, and then a cartilage operation a few years later. I'd therefore seen great physiotherapy in action before I had my AS diagnosis, during all those efforts to learn to stand and walk again in my early years. But when I came to my AS diagnosis, things were rather different. First, just after the diagnosis, my consultant told me I would be getting physiotherapy specifically designed for my condition. And I turned up at my first NHS appointment as directed with sports kit and swimming gear. I met the physiotherapist, who took no details, did not ask any questions, and I was told to wait in a cubicle. About 10 minutes later, she came back with a single sheet of photocopied paper and told me I could go. The paper had some basic exercises on it, and that was all. She did not go through any of the exercises with me. She didn't tell me anything to look out for or give me any advice at all. I was fuming. What a waste of time. I'd driven 45 minutes for this and had to drive the same amount of time back, as well as having taken a day off out of my hectic job. It did not give me any enthusiasm to do any more physio for my AS. That certainly wasn't special physio designated for my condition. This used to annoy my consultant, who kept telling me to join NAS so I could do physiotherapy for the AS. It took another 3.5 years before he persuaded or bribed me, story in itself, to go to a local NAS exercise session in Portsmouth back in 1996. All I can say is, what a difference. Quite simply, joining NAS and getting proper specialist physiotherapy care and advice changed my life. Some 26 years later, I'm now chairman of NAS Portsmouth, which is the largest group in the UK with over 40 members. Very quickly after joining NAS, I found out that the physios were totally different. Their knowledge, interest and expertise really was inspirational and helped me develop an interest in trying to self-manage my condition as much as possible, not just pop pills. I really found the experience transformational. Being shown how to do the exercises in the right way without cheating, for example, as if AS patients would ever cheat, was incredibly helpful, and advice about doing the exercises at home was ideal. As well as the NAS exercise groups, Portsmouth have been very fortunate in having a 6-week system of hydrotherapy sessions for newly diagnosed AS patients, where they're given in-depth advice, exercises and support. Pre-COVID, all those years ago now, these were backed up with 3 physio-led courses, a year for AS Axial Spa patients, where the patients were given not only hydrotherapy, but introductions into different forms of land exercises that allowed the patients to build up a tailored exercise profile dedicated just to them. The physios also conducted and coordinated education sessions about the condition too. And as time went on, the efforts from the Queen Alexandra Hospital Rheumatology Department to secure funded AS physiotherapy specialist has meant that we have a team of physiotherapists who now know our condition for direct care and who can champion our needs. This has proved absolutely invaluable. They work locally, but also with the A-Stretch organisation in patient education, and which has led our branch into taking part in various national courses for physios and other health professionals into the best ways of treating AS. For those who don't know, A-Stretch is the physiotherapy group special interest in managing AS and Axial SPA. This involvement has helped grow local interest in AS and Axial SPA and the specialist techniques needed to help treat and help sufferers. Patients have responded very well to this specialist support and greater involvement from the physios, and the patients have generally shown a much better enthusiasm for trying to help themselves than they did before having the physiotherapy guidance. So after all this good news, I was saddened last month when I heard that one of our old members, who now lives down the coast from us, had recently had physiotherapy prescribed by her new consultant. She had turned up at her first session and she experienced exactly what happened to me 30-odd years ago. The local physio had given her a single sheet of paper with some exercises on and had left her to her own devices. No questions, no guidance, no discussion, no physical help. This just emphasises that although there seems to have been great improvements in the physiotherapy treatment of AS over the last 20 years, and I know from my time as a NAS trustee how much work has gone on in this area, a great deal of additional training clearly needs to be still done to ensure that the key specialist training for these physiotherapy professionals is continued apace. NAS has a clear key role here. Early diagnosis is surely important, but so is the ongoing treatment and management of those who already have their diagnosis. There seems little point in diagnosing people quickly unless the means to treat them are in place, and this needs to be from a specialised, dedicated physiotherapy team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger, for that very interesting presentation. We'll go straight now to our second presentation of this afternoon, which is from Dr. Yelis Pryor, who is the Senior Research Fellow, Clinical Occupational Therapist and Vice President of the British Society for Rheumatology, who will be providing a perspective from the British Society for Rheumatology on key issues around physiotherapy capacity within the system. Dr. Pryor.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Yelis Pryor. I'm very pleased to be able to talk to you today about addressing the growing deficit in the physiotherapy workforce. I'm the Vice President of the British Society for Rheumatology, and I'll be reporting on our recently published paper on the workforce deficits in the rheumatology departments. So at the BSR, we bring together expertise from across the rheumatology profession, from senior rheumatology consultants to allied health professionals specializing in rheumatology, such as physiotherapists, harnessing a wide variety of experience and skills to ensure we support our members to the very best of our combined ability. Our membership expands from clinicians to basic scientists to educators and clinical academics and researchers to make sure that we are helping the rheumatology workforce to provide best guidance and recommendations for clinical practice. So in terms of rheumatic and musculoskeletal disorders, which is the focus of British Society for Rheumatology, we know that back pain is the UK's leading cause of disability and sits at the heart of musculoskeletal services. So musculoskeletal disorders are primarily managed in the community, whilst inflammatory and rare diseases are managed by specialist multidisciplinary teams in the secondary care and hospitals. In terms of clinical specialist physiotherapists in rheumatology, from diagnosis to self-management, they are a cost and clinically effective way to restore patients' movement and function, prevent disability in activities of daily living and work, and improve the quality of life of individuals living with axial spondyloarthritis. Unfortunately, in the NHS England, we don't have enough physiotherapists to deliver the level of care recommended by the NICE guidance. A 2019 Freedom of Information request found that patients were waiting up to 4 months to see a physiotherapist in the NHS. Of course, COVID-19 pandemic worsened these waits, with those who deferred seeking help now coming forward, adding to ever-growing waiting lists. With these longer waiting times, physiotherapy services have increased focus on services through supporting patients through waiting well services, which are critical to elective recovery success and patient outcomes. This means physiotherapists are supporting people on the waiting list by communicating with them effectively to self-manage their conditions whilst they're attending to patients that are actually in their clinics and outpatient clinics. So we know that 50% of hospital departments in the NHS don't have a specialist physiotherapist rheumatology embedded within multidisciplinary team. Unfortunately, this is not exclusive to physiotherapy, but vacancies and lack of staff across the whole multidisciplinary team, such as rheumatology consultants, nurses, and especially clinical specialists, allied health professionals such as occupational therapists, podiatrists, psychologists, and pharmacists are lacking. These workforce shortages and vacancies obviously impact upon both the quality and safety of care, as well as preventative approaches and early diagnosis to help both our NHS and the economy. So, as British Society for Rheumatology, we produced this workforce report in which we made recommendations where we really insisted on all rheumatology services to have dedicated physiotherapy service with expertise in managing patients with inflammatory diseases, such as unpleasant spondyloarthritis and axial spondyloarthropathies. So we are asking All-Party Parliamentary Group members to write to their ICS to ask about rheumatology workforce planning. We are also asking the forthcoming Health Education England workforce strategy to commit to training and recruiting more physiotherapists in rheumatology, with a clear plan for developing the rheumatology workforce as a whole to increase the service delivery to our patients. It's really important to increase the exposure to rheumatology. This must also increase in both undergraduate and postgraduate curriculum through teaching modules and clinical placement opportunities for all members of the multidisciplinary team members. This is all important for providing the recommended care by NICE guidelines. Thank you so much for listening to me tonight, and I will be here to answer any questions you might have.
Liz, thank you so much for that presentation. And speaking of questions, a reminder that you've got the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So if you do have questions that you'd like to ask the panelists this evening, then please do put them into the Q&A, and we'll pick those up later on in this session. But in the meantime, I will go on to our third presentation, which is by Amanda Hensman-Crook, who will be speaking in her capacity as the MSK Subject Matter Expert for Health Education England's National Workforce Transformation Team. Amanda.
Hello, my name is Amanda Hensman-Crook. I work currently for Health Education England as their National Musculoskeletal Subject Matter Expert. I work clinically as a consultant physiotherapist specialising in musculoskeletal conditions, and I'm a visiting lecturer at the University of Winchester lecturing on musculoskeletal conditions in their advanced practice programme. Today I just want to raise your awareness of educational standards that have been brought in recently or are under development to be brought in within the next financial year to provide early identification and diagnosis of undifferentiated and undiagnosed conditions, of which one of these would be axial spondyloarthritis. So as we know, seeing the right person with the right capability at the right time is absolutely key for this group of people. There have been 3 significant educational developments since October 2020 to support the early identification and diagnosis of axial spondyloarthritis to ensure the best management and optimal outcomes. First contact practitioners and advanced practitioners in primary care, roadmap to practice. The United Kingdom Advanced Practice Musculoskeletal Standards. Musculoskeletal Rheumatology Advanced Practice Standards. These ensure that clinicians are trained at the right academic level of practice and have proof of capability academically with a portfolio of evidence, and a portfolio of evidence in line with GP training of application of that academic knowledge into practice. This will raise the clinical quality of clinicians at the front of the care pathway and the impact. So the first contact practitioners, advanced practitioner in primary care roadmap to practice is for all clinicians who work with undifferentiated and undiagnosed conditions in primary care. The training pathway is for all MSK clinicians, not just for physiotherapists, for any other clinician that are able to meet the requirements of the roadmap. First contact practice is proof of capability in the clinical pillar at master's level. Advanced practice is proof of capability across 4 pillars of practice at master's level. There are 2 routes that they can take for training, portfolio route and the taught route. The portfolio route has a bespoke roadmap training supervision programme that aligns with GP training and meets the GMC requirements for supervision. For the taught route, there is a master's module for first contact practitioners, of which Health Education England is funding a significant number each year. Both of the routes are identical in terms of the knowledge, skills and attributes required, and both have mandatory training in terms of some e-learning modules, as well as having to meet the requirements academically at master's level. These modules are really important. The training is important because not only does it prove capability at master's level across musculoskeletal conditions and the way to manage them, but it also makes sure that they are able to use underpinning research and use a personalised care approach to each patient with shared decision making. It also ensures that the clinicians using a biopsychosocial model of care, and they're able to not just look at the musculoskeletal condition, but the environment and all the other comorbidities that the patient might have, so the individualised treatment. This ensures the proof of capability academically and in practice, which has been missing in the system up until now. In February 2022, CQC have written a mythbuster that's gone out into the system that supports this. This is really important as we have more musculoskeletal practitioners moving into primary care, particularly accelerated under the additional role scheme, to make sure that we have the right people at the front end of the care pathway. The UK Advanced Practice Musculoskeletal Standards. So there's been a development of a group called the Musculoskeletal Partnership. It's really important that we have an alignment with all of our musculoskeletal specialities across the board. The Musculoskeletal Partnership has membership from all areas of musculoskeletal professions, such as osteopaths, physiotherapists, the Faculty of Exercise Medicine, GPs with extended roles, and other specialities and subspecialities such as rheumatology, trauma and orthopaedics and pain. It was really important that we were able to get the musculoskeletal community to agree to just one standard, one level of practice at master's level. This is really important when we're looking at advanced practitioners. They need to be able to work at master's level and in the clinical education, leadership and research pillars. This gives the highest impact system leadership. Musculoskeletal first contact practice that we talked about before is a subset of the advanced practice standards to meet the clinical pillar of those 4 pillars. So it all joins together as a training pathway from first contact practice to advanced practice, with the foundation of clinical running straight through that with the undifferentiated undiagnosed conditions. Advanced practitioners work cross-organisationally and multi-professionally, providing systems leadership. This is really important if we're raising the quality of care in any area of care at a population health level. So in terms of axial spondyloarthritis, it's really important that we have this leadership to make sure that they are caught early and managed appropriately. These standards are currently being developed into a credential which has learning outcomes, and they'll be operationalised across all of the health HEIs across the country, educational institutes across the country, to flatten any unwarranted variation in master's courses for musculoskeletal, and it will ensure that rheumatology, as part of that, is able to be guaranteed to be looked at with expertise across all of the musculoskeletal professions across the whole of the healthcare pathway. The third and final one that's under negotiation at the moment in terms of turning it into a credential is the Musculoskeletal Rheumatology Advanced Practice Standards. The framework has been written and agreed as a standard. To be able to be classed as a musculoskeletal rheumatology advanced practice clinician, you have to first do to meet all of the criteria both academically and in practice for the musculoskeletal advanced practice framework that we spoke about before. This is an add-on, this is extra to that. So these musculoskeletal clinicians will need to complete both things to be recognised as an advanced practitioner in rheumatology. This will provide specific population health leadership across all 4 pillars of practice in rheumatology, which is key for making sure that we get the early identification and diagnosis of axial spondyloarthritis right across the whole of the healthcare system, and to make sure that the education's in the right place at the right time.
Amanda, thank you for that presentation. And thank you also for everyone who's sending in your comments and questions into the Q&A box. We'll now go straight to our fourth presentation this afternoon, which is by Will Gregory, who is a consultant physiotherapist at Salford Royal Hospital. And he'll be providing an overview of a recently published capabilities framework and what it could mean for upskilling the wider workforce. Will.
So thank you very much for the invite to present this early evening. My name's Will Gregory. I'm a consultant physiotherapist employed by the Rheumatology team at Salford Royal Hospital in Greater Manchester, and I also have a role in co-chairing the National Rheumatology Physiotherapy Clinical Interest Group. I'm going to talk about the capabilities framework document we've recently produced, the work that went into that, and how we see it hopefully impacting practice and staffing in the future. So what does a physiotherapist do? I'm going to the Versus Arthritis booklet. We are a healthcare professional who helps you remain active and independent, both at home and at work. We're experts in assessing movement, addressing individual needs, helping to improve function and managing pain, and clearly all of those elements are relevant for the Axial SPA patient we're working with. So what kind of provision is currently provided? This is the Rheumatology Workforce report released last year and based on data from the GIRFT, Getting It Right First Time, rheumatology interviews up and down England that were undertaken the year prior, and also some additional interviews done by BSR to fill in some gaps of the data they had from that document, in addition to the national early inflammatory arthritis data. The main concern is that 7% of trusts reported they didn't have access to physiotherapy services, and also of mild concern is that 50% of departments don't have a physiotherapist embedded in their MDT. So the physiotherapist may be working for them, but there are arm's length, and perhaps therefore the relationship and the treatments offered may be somewhat impacted by that. The recommendation of the BSR Workforce report was that all adult and paediatric rheumatology departments must have access to a dedicated physiotherapy service with expertise in managing patients who have inflammatory MSK disease. So what's the current provision? And this is from colleagues at the South Coast Axial SPA network, where the team at Salisbury have looked at the number of hours they have of rheumatology physiotherapy and compared it to 4 other trusts in that South Coast network anonymously. And you can see a massive reduction there at the Salisbury team. The current average provision is based on the Rheumatology Workforce data, which implies around 30 hours per month per consultant of rheumatology physio provision is the current. Now that isn't a recommendation, that's just what we found from the national data at this stage. Moving outside of national, this was our regional work in the northwest, where we surveyed 14 rheumatology physiotherapists working within local teams in that region and found a massive variation in the staffing. Here we're looking at ratios, and it goes from 1 to 1 in the staffing of the medical to physio team to 1 to 8, so a massive spread. The workforce report implies 5 to 1 is the current provision, but the data we've looked at with regards to patients seen and best practice suggests we might be wanting to look at 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, although there are no formal recommendations for that, just the understanding that the current provision appears to be about 5 to 1. So we then thought about what did we do as rheumatology physiotherapists, which led to a national survey of current clinical practices undertaken online in October-November 2019. We got a good number of responses from all 4 nations, and we're happy to see that there was a large amount of job roles described by our survey respondents, and the colour coding here looks at what level of practice these people are paid on Agenda for Change by their local organisation for those job roles done. I'm not expecting you to read the whole slide, but just to give an idea of the breadth of jobs undertaken, but also that some jobs are only done by around 15% of respondents, so there is some variety in the job roles undertaken. This led us to creating an initial draft of around 1,000 statements of capabilities that we would expect for a member of rheumatology physiotherapy staff or a physiotherapist working with rheumatology patients, including non-registered or support worker staff as well. We drafted that a number of times as a core authorship group, but also got 30 expert rheumatology physios from across the country to contribute, including a mini Delphi process to tune down those statements. And we've got around 200 to 300 now in the final document. And this was ratified by stakeholders, including the British Society of Rheumatology and the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. The document was then considered as how it would fit into the already established capabilities, including those from the European-wide group, from the nursing group in the UK, and then broader documents from across the MSK platform. Our document was released October 2020, so fairly recently, and has hopefully had a decent impact already. We've seen lots of people using it for their professional development, but also it's been used to work towards business cases for new staff. It's set up to follow the journey of the patient, so the 6 sections reflect the role of the physiotherapist in pre-diagnosis and screening, perhaps in FCP, first contact practitioner type posts, or triage or interface roles. Then thinking about what investigations may be done, and then on the far side of the slide here, the treatments we would offer and the support we would offer in long-term management of rheumatological conditions. Each of the statements allow the person completing it to score themselves from 1 to 3 on their ability to meet that statement. Whilst the survey I showed you previously did mention band levels, we've been quite cautious here with this national document to look rather at advanced level, consultant level, highly specialist level, specialist levels. So the statements are not band specific, but they're more about levels of practice that we're trying to see where we would expect people to be performing and what tasks they would be undertaking. There is some overlap once we get to the higher levels with roles that might be taken by other members of the MDT, so occupational therapists, the nurses, or indeed the rheumatologists themselves. So it is aspirational from that point of view as we think about how physiotherapists can advance their practice to support the rheumatology issues nationally. From that, we've also, I'm afraid, going back to the band levels, we've also put together some sample job descriptions which have been used, as I've said already, for development of business cases and support of implementing rheumatology physiotherapy to trusts where they've been short on numbers from the ratios I've described previously, or perhaps even that 7% from the BSR workforce report who didn't have rheumatology physio access. So this is part of a broader picture, but hopefully it's allowed us as an in-house team of rheumatology physiotherapists to define what we're currently doing, to aspire to what we want to be doing, and to share good practice to make sure there's a better standard of care for rheumatology patients, axial SPA patients, both after diagnosis and in their long-term care, but also prior to diagnosis, and making sure this is picked up early for the issues that we know today delayed diagnosis will have. So thank you again very much for the invite to present. Very much looking forward to the open discussions at the end of today's session. And thanks for your time and attention.
Thanks, Will, for your presentation. There was a lot of detail on those slides. So depending on what size screen you're watching this this evening, we will try to share the presentation slides with you afterwards if you want to see what you've been seeing on screen in a little more detail. So we'll go from Will to our final presentation of this afternoon, which is from Mo Motion. Mo is an extended scope practitioner at Newcastle Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust, and Mo will be exploring local best practice and what it could mean for other parts of the country. Over to you, Mo.
Thanks very much, Tom. My name is Mo Motion, and I'm one of the extended scope physios in Newcastle Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust. I run 2 AXPA screening clinics each week and also have a physiotherapy caseload of the more complex AXPA and rheumatology patients. I'm also proud to be a member of the A-Stretch committee. I'm here today to talk about our Aspiring to Excellence journey with NAS and how it helped us to improve our assessment and treatment of AXPA patients, and how we implemented management pathways in line with best practice and NICE guidelines. Thank you for the opportunity to be involved today, and I welcome any questions in the Q&A. So we started our Aspiring to Excellence journey in August 2019 as part of the first cohort under the leadership of Dr. Leslie Kay and Dr. Ben Thompson. We identified 3 aspects of our care that we felt were opportunities to improve on, but for the purpose of this talk, I will be concentrating on the specialist physiotherapy service. We were aiming to reduce referral delay and extend our specialist AXPA service into the community. As a team, we looked at our strengths when applying for the programme and felt we already had lots of experience and expertise in AXPA, great team spirit with a team of doctors, nurses, occupational therapy and physio, and others in the team already had QI skills, not myself, and we all knew that caring for our patients was at the centre of everything we were striving to do. Just before we applied, we had an unique opportunity to take advantage of the recent reorganisation of the local physiotherapy musculoskeletal services, which is called Tyneside Integrated Musculoskeletal Service, or TIMS, and to improve the referral and care for people with AXPA. Community and hospital physio services from 2 acute trusts in Newcastle and Gateshead had been merged and commissioned to provide a self-referral pathway for MSK services, as well as providing physio treatment closer to home at community sites in Newcastle and Gateshead. Initially, I can't lie, this really threatened our specialist AXPA service. We'd previously had a team of physios which delivered the programme, but these staff had been absorbed into the overall community service. We knew that we needed to start again and to rebuild a team of AXPA-aware and specialist physios throughout the community service and provide training and communication links to provide the best care for patients. So what does the Newcastle AXPA service look like? Referrals into the service come from different sources and are initially screened by one of the consultant rheumatologists. From there, appropriate referrals are seen in the ESP lead screening clinic by myself. We'd previously held training sessions with the community physios around the importance of identifying AXPA and recommended the use of the screening criteria, in particular the ASAS expert criteria for inflammatory back pain assessment. We mapped out our current patient journey, looking for any delays from referral to diagnosis, and we evaluated the use of the ASAS screening on all referrals received from the TIMS service. Training sessions were held again to ensure the community physios were AXPA aware, and inflammatory screening became standard in all MSK assessments. As you can see, we plotted the changes on graphs, and initially only 80% of the referrals had ASAS screening questions noted on them, but after some training, this result increased to 100% in January 2020. There were staff changes in February, and it dropped to 75%, so this reinforced to us the need for continual communication and teaching, especially when staff rotate. In March 2020, just before lockdown, we were on 100% compliance. When the clinics restarted in September, it was no surprise to see that the compliance had again decreased, but recent audits have shown 100% compliance, which we felt was a major step forward in helping to reduce the delay to diagnosis. But despite a difficult year, what did we actually achieve? To name a few, web-based physio from Giraffe Healthcare, which is an online, interactive, remote monitoring and personalised exercise plan, had been implemented and was available to all AXPA back pain patients. We also managed to restart our hydrotherapy post-COVID, and to help with communication, a weekly AXPA MDT meeting was started, and physio staff from the community services were invited and continue to attend weekly. There were also challenges in this year, apart from COVID, that when personnel changed in the physio team in the community, there was a chance of lack of consistency in care provided. This again reinforced the need for us to develop robust communication with the correct people in the community service. We also realised that in order for our AXPA service improvement to continue, that we needed dedicated team time, and aspiring to excellence gave us the focus to continue with this. Significant improvement with the delay to diagnosis was made, so the focus shifted into ensuring the full AXPA self-referral programme was fully embedded into the community physio's practice. The team then wrote an ambitious driver diagram that there would be 100% implementation of AXPA physio pathways by March 2022. This is the part of the programme that I feel really helped us the most and also helped us to engage with the community services. Driver diagrams were new to me, and at the start they seemed really quite daunting. The process helped us to see beyond the challenges and keep focused, as the diagrams really show the change that has come about and are very powerful. So looking at some of the aspects, in order to develop a rheumatology physio team that crossed between Newcastle and the community services, we needed to identify physios within the community service who would lead on rheumatology and particular AXPA, and to start clinical discussions about patients between these two services. Training sessions and shadowing sessions were started with the community staff with myself, and the feedback was really positive and helped reinforce the need for specialist physio for AXPA patients. Through the teaching and shadowing sessions, we were able to develop and agree clinical standards for physio assessment and treatment across the three services, and also able to address and start to understand some of the previous barriers that were preventing the best practice pathways from being implemented. So as you can see, we now have an AXPA pathway that incorporates all the individual aspects of patient care. We're now confident that any AXPA patient over the Newcastle Gateshead services will now receive the same quality of care and have designated staff in the community to facilitate team working. However, we're not resting yet, and we're now evaluating the pathway through a QI project led by one of our staff in the trust called Katie Merry, and also including patient views. To end, I do feel that we would not have achieved this without the push and drive from the Aspiring to Excellence team and programme. And personally, this has been a fantastic CPD opportunity, but overall has improved the patient care and quality that we now provide. Many thanks for listening.
Mo, thank you so much for that presentation. And as I say, that was the final presentation from this afternoon. So we're going to move to the question and answer group discussion part of the meeting. I'm going to be joined shortly by my glamorous assistant, I think, Dale Webb, who's here to help with this as well. And we're going to look at sort of just to sort of set the scene, I think, just 4 broad topic areas we're going to be looking at, which are: what are people's own experiences of the role of physiotherapy within axial SPA? What are the threats to rheumatology physiotherapy provision? How to overcome them? How can we get rheumatology physiotherapy onto a stronger footing? And what's the realistic aim of improving current practice, and where do we want to be in 3 years' time? I think that's the sort of broad areas we're trying to cover. But Dale, I don't know if you want to kick off this this part of the discussion.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks to all of our speakers for coming in, and those of you who are joining online, and in particular thank you to our parliamentarians, including Lord Campbell-Sabers and Baroness Masham, who joined. We're especially grateful for your time. Let's first explore this issue about people's experience of having physiotherapy, and if we can bring onto the stage, please, in a moment, Zoe Clark, that would be appreciated. In Roger's presentation, he said that specialist physiotherapy changed his life and that actually it was transformational. And I think that the patient benefit of physiotherapy is very clear. But Zoe, let's hear from you. What's been your experience of physiotherapy?
So I've had really mixed experiences over the years, personally, with accessing that specialist physiotherapy. I've had very varying experiences, but definitely when I have had that more expert knowledge from people with the further training in rheumatology and that knowledge of axial SPA, it's made a huge difference. And I think if I'd had access to that much earlier in my condition, it would have really made a difference in how I was managing my symptoms and the confidence in managing my condition and the impact that it's had on my life as well. And certainly that's reflected in the calls that I take on the NAS helpline as well. We hear very varying experiences, unfortunately, but yeah, absolutely hear the really fantastic stories that when people have that expert knowledge, the difference it can make.
Very much so. Let's just call up to the stage Kate Waite and keep Zoe on stage. Part of the context for us right now, of course, is COVID, its impact on the NHS in so many ways, including impact on physiotherapy, and Paul Hillman refers to that in his chat. We've been doing some work to help manage patients or work with patients who are on the waiting list for rheumatology. I know you've been working with Kate on that. Can we bring Kate onto the stage, please? Hi, Kate. Thank you for joining. Tell us about the work you've been doing to support patients who are actually on the waiting list for their physiotherapy.
Yeah, so NAS have been supporting me with some online Zoom self-management sessions, which we've been able to offer to our new patients as a waiting list initiative, but mainly just to have that collaboration with NAS. So Zoe and I have been working together to deliver that high quality information to our patients collaboration as well with one of our occupational therapy team, Kathy Knoll, although actually Kathy joined us for the initial summer sessions, which we did as individual sessions, and then subsequently we've just been doing with physiotherapy and NAS. And the last one, we've had really brilliant interaction on the question and answer with the patients, and we hope to do it as a sort of QI project too. Zoe's already written up it from the NAS side, and we hope to get to also develop it with the patient feedback as well.
Okay, so there are things we can do even in the context of COVID to try and support patients. At the heart of some of the presentations tonight, though, is a pretty stark set of views about the current crisis. Let's use the word crisis really in rheumatology workforce. Can we bring onto the stage, please, Rob Yeldon from the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, who I'm sure will want to contribute to this discussion, and I'll bring in other colleagues who I know will want to be part of this. Yeah, Liz, in your presentation, you said that from diagnosis to self-management, physiotherapy is a cost and clinically effective way to restore movement and function and prevent disability. The case has been amply made for physiotherapy. Why are we in the situation where 50% of rheumatology departments don't have specialist physiotherapists embedded? How have we got to this position?
It's a very good question, Dale, and we only have those statistics because we have done a survey at the BSR, so the NHS doesn't necessarily release these numbers, or NHS England. We know that we have issues with training, with available posts. For example, the specialist training in physiotherapy in rheumatology is not straightforward if, let's say, a rheumatology nurse is to train or rheumatologist training the pathway. So at BSR, we're doing a lot of new initiatives to support these training pathways to be more straightforward, but we also need the government's help in order to open up more clinical placement opportunities, for example, or include rheumatology within the rotations of the NHS training programs for Band 5 physiotherapists and other allied health professionals. So we've submitted a written evidence to the House of Commons Health and Social Care Select Committee inquiry, for example, outline our deep concerns about how current plans for the recruitment, training and retention of NHS workforce are impacting both the practice of rheumatology and quality of patient care. As you said, we have really good research evidence that clinical specialist physiotherapy and extended scope practitioner roles are much more effective, not just for the management of the patient's self-care, but also for the freeing up the clinicians now for, let's say, rheumatological consultants and nurses, because they're also struggling with posts, so that we are actually it's a very cost-effective way to develop clinical practice.
Very much so. Since BSR published the report, I mean, I'm curious to know what the response has been, both to the stark findings in it, but also to the recommendations that you're making. And what kind of traction have you had with it?
So we have been working since the report on social media with our other member organizations, with the charities, to actually encourage people to write constituents, for example, to write to their MPs about the workforce issues. And we've been we've been trying to put more pressure on MPs in terms of the health and care bill. We've had enormous response from our membership and social media about the workforce issues, especially those working in rheumatology. It's made a huge echo, but really to move forward now, we need the government's help to open up more positions for specialist physiotherapists and AHPs and nurses in rheumatology, and just really promote rheumatology as a specialty from undergraduate and postgraduate position to all new healthcare professions, which we have plenty coming into the NHS.
Thank you, Liz. Rob, the picture seems pretty, a fairly parlous state we're in right now. Is that the assessment of the CSP as well?
Well, I think there are some challenges, certainly. It's really interesting hearing the discussion tonight about rheumatology physiotherapy, because if I was sat in a group talking about stroke, I'm sure we'd be hearing exactly the same about neurological physiotherapy. If I was sat in a group talking about lung health, we'd hear the same about respiratory physiotherapy. So I don't think it's a unique problem to rheumatology. I think it's a system-wide problem and a challenge. The good news is that physiotherapy is more popular than ever. There are more people wanting to study physiotherapy. than there are places to study, despite the massive expansion of higher education. What we don't have is either any consistent planning across national, regional, and local levels to assess how many physios at each different level of practice we need. And that is a real problem, not having that assessment. There is only one figure anywhere in any NHS England data, and that is for first contact physiotherapists. So that 5,000 target is the only number that we have that assesses how many practitioners are needed for anything. So that makes planning more difficult, clearly. And there isn't, as I think has already been mentioned, the kind of sustained funding and programs of development to allow people to develop in specialist areas like rheumatology and to acquire advanced practice skills over a period of time. There has been some excellent work by HE around FCP, but it's not permanently funded. There isn't actually any system for physiotherapy development in quite the same way as there is, for example, for medicine. So there's some big workforce planning challenges that mean that it's a really difficult context for rheumatology physiotherapy, because you're competing with physios from all the other specialisms, because we are not training enough people at the right levels to meet the needs of services that are being developed.
Thank you, Rob. We do have Andy Bennett here, who's National Clinical Director. I think Andy is in commute, so I think he's only able to join us for a few minutes and probably not in his usual jacket and tie, but that's fine. We can forgive him on this occasion. Andy, if you're willing to show your face on screen, that'd be wonderful. I would love to hear your perspective on these issues.
Hello, I'm sorry. Forgive me to start off with. I'm on my commuting stuff, ironically in a physiotherapy clinic, so it's probably quite apt. And also forgive me, Dale, I was logging in there, so I don't hear your question.
It's a more of a general response to the findings of the BSR Workforce Planning Report. Is pretty tough to read, really, the findings around the deficits and what's required. What's your sense? I mean, are you optimistic about the future to address the deficits, or are you feeling pretty glum about this?
Naturally, I'm not feeling glum. But I think I've got to approach this with a degree of pragmatism. So look, what we're talking about is workforce, okay? And what we've got to think about is MSK as a broad picture before we focus down on rheumatology. And if we think of where physiotherapy sits, and we think of the sort of whole pathway of MSK delivery, which is kind of crudely speaking, pre-hospital, hospital, post-hospital, physiotherapy has a number of roles in that space across a number of specialities. So it's got a role with regard to triage, and of course, that is linked with advanced practice, but wider with and first contact practice. And that's about identifying those patients who could have inflammatory conditions and signposting in a timely manner. And it's also about rehabilitation and supportive self-management. So rehabilitation in terms of getting people, helping people to get back to what they want to do, and supportive self-management around MSK conditions, which are long-term conditions, and helping people best manage those. Now, SPA and what we're talking about falls within the sort of rehab / supportive self-management space. We know that we've got very good medications to help manage this condition, and we know that physiotherapy can help. We know that we have a big workforce challenge right across MSK, inclusive of physiotherapy. So then how do we need to think about that? Well, we need to think about the overarching strategy for delivery of MSK services across the pre-hospital, hospital and post-hospital space, thinking about the demands of orthopedic, spine, children, young people, fragility fractures and pain management. And we need to factor rheumatology into that, both in the triage space and in the supportive self-management space, and we need to factor SPA into that. And that needs to be factored into wider workforce planning. We can't think of workforce planning, in my view, in terms of different polarised areas. We need to think about it as a whole, but very much the challenge we describe is here. Then we need to think about the demand. So we don't have enough physiotherapists. I am a physiotherapist, and that is a challenge, and it's going to take time to train people. But we have other clinical specialities who can support in the supportive self-management and rehab space, health coaches, social prescribers, and other AHPs. So we need to think of the big picture and physiotherapy sitting within that. And then we need to think about capability, as quite rightly talked about. And I think it's fair to say we've got great work, unbelievable work going on in the advanced practice space, which Amanda, and I'm sure you'll bring her in, is leading on. Now, there is an element of that focusing on FCP, but it's focusing on wider advanced practice and indeed consultant practice. And so we are behind our rheumatology colleagues with regard to that. But I think certainly in physiotherapy, we're building that structure and we're learning from the experiences of our medical colleagues and we're wrapping that around. Now, what we also need to think about, of course, is not just advanced practice and FCP, but physiotherapy as a whole. But I think that's being thought about because that's part of the stepping stones into advanced practice roles, whether that's in rheumatology, in triage, in support of self-management and rehab. So workforce is one of the biggest challenges we have in MSK, without shadow of a doubt, right across that whole spectrum I was talking about. Physiotherapists are a key part of that workforce. And, you know, I am a consultant physiotherapist, so of course I'm going to say that, but we know that from the literature. But we need to think of workforce planning broader, reflecting that whole system approach, the multiple challenges and the multiple professions to really give the right level of support to all our patients, including those with SPA, to ensure that the right supportive self-management is there to support the excellent medical management.
Andy, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it. I know you're here just for a short time this evening, but hugely appreciated. I want to bring Amanda in a moment too. Also, Amanda, in Yella's presentation, she touched on the recommendation from the BSR Workforce Report, which was that for HEE to have a workforce strategy that commits to training and recruiting more physios with a clear plan for developing rheumatology workforce as a whole. Where are we, do you think, in terms of that?
I think we're moving forward with it now, but certainly we've been focusing on the pipeline that's looking towards specialising the MSK workforce so they can work with the early identification and management of these conditions. So, but we're not ignoring the other end of the pathway either. So at the bottom end of the pathway where we've got the clinical placements, there have been monies put into HEIs to make sure that we have placements across the whole of the healthcare pathway in the MSK for MSK physiotherapy for the learners before they actually register. And then you've got your newly registered people and opening clinical placements, and there's a lot of work going on along the enhanced pathway, which is a word that you're going to hear more and more. So in health education, we don't talk about job titles and badges and name badges, we talk about the level of practice. So when somebody comes out, you've got a newly qualified individual, which they'll be for a couple of years. Then for 3 years, there might be an enhanced practitioner, which would be like equate to like band 6 pay, if you like. And then they can develop into, if it's like a more specialist role, into a band 7 role, and then into an advanced practice role, to band 8 role, and then moving up the bandings into consultant. But so we're looking at the whole of the MSK pathway. The work that we've been doing that will have the highest impact on quality and impact across the healthcare system at the moment was the, in terms of primary care, you've got the first contact practitioners. So that's only lives in primary care. And these are the guys that have been proven to be working at master's capability, both academically and in practice. And the in practice part is really, really important. It's okay to like learn lots of clever things, but if you can't actually identify the early condition and look at the whole person, then it's not really worth the time spent on writing the essay. Do you know what I mean? So it's a whole supervision strategy had to go around there. And the way that we're doing it is and also for the advanced practice part is we've aligned it with GP training, because we know that works in terms of the application of knowledge into practice and making sure there's a portfolio of evidence in practice as well as academically to make sure these people can actually do the job when they're there in front of the patient. They've got all the right skill set to do that. So the impact in terms of first contact practice has started now, as the first contact practitioners in before the additional role scheme, and there will be afterwards as well. So we needed to make sure that that we had the training in place and some funded training in place from the taught route to make sure that we had these clinicians trained up so that they can identify things like axial spondyloarthritis early in the pathway, because they're the experts, to stop this still awful statistic of maybe 6 years before the diagnosis. It's to try and find them straight away. And it's quite common. I work in primary care. I work as a consultant MSK clinician in primary care, and I pick these things up because I'm trained to do it. Then the same for the advanced practice, that's across all of the clinical settings. And again, we're looking at supervision and supervision assessments in the same way as in primary care. There's pilots going on at the moment. And this is all aligning with a big pilot we're doing with the RCGP at the moment. So the impact for the advanced practice part will come a little bit later, but will certainly fit within that 3-year envelope that we were talking about. Andy mentioned the consultant practice. I didn't talk much about that at the moment, because it's something that's under development. But again, that really important moving into the consultant practice realm, specialising for MSK, is on its way as well. And again, within that three-year window.
Thank you, Amanda. That's a really kind of thoughtful response to the question. I wanted to come back to Rob. Rob, hearing both Amanda and Andy's comments, do you have anything that you want to say in response to that?
Well, I think they're both in a really challenging position, being officials, and they're doing great work in the areas they're working on. But what they don't obviously have is the control over the funding from the Treasury and the kind of decision making that's being done on a kind of whole workforce basis for the NHS and beyond. And I guess my plea to the members of the APPG is to use your influence to try and ensure that the Treasury understands that releasing funding is not just putting money into a bottomless pit. It's actually going to really transform lives and indeed probably save money in other areas. So that funding to develop this workforce that we need, and the kind of people, not the newly qualified, but the people who have been in practice for a number of years that Amanda's talking about, getting that pipeline of people trained up into those specialisms and those advanced practice roles is really where we need to be focusing. And as Andy says, there are other people who can backfill while those people are developing and learning. And we really need to be getting our qualified staff, our registered staff, to only do what they can do. So making better use of support workers, of other professionals who can contribute in other areas is really, really important. That does need to be planned. And the bottom line at the moment is we don't have workforce plans at each of the levels we need them that look at that holistic workforce that we need to deliver. So any pressure, any encouragement you can give to the department, to NHS England and to your local ICSs to actually start that workforce planning would be really, really appreciated, I think, as well as that's thinking about where's the money going to come from to develop that workforce.
Thank you, Rob. Lots of questions coming. I want to respond to them. If I can just bring onto the stage, please, Claire Jeffries and Carol McCrum. And while we're doing that, there's a question from Kate Waite about who asks, are there plans to include Axial Spa teaching in undergraduate physio training? Most newly qualified Band 5 physios I meet haven't had any information on AxSpa in their training. Who would like to respond to that question? Yeah, Liz, please. And then Rob.
Sorry, my microphone got stuck. Unfortunately, not across the whole curricula. So it depends on what university, where you are. For example, I work at the University of Salford and I'm a rheumatology specialist, occupational therapist. I also live with ankylosing spondylitis. So I teach rheumatology to both undergrad physio and occupational therapists and talk about axial spondyloarthritis as a spectrum. But really, we need more sort of to go into the whole curriculum for whole occupational therapists and physiotherapists to have more rheumatology, inflammatory arthritis related teaching. If that answers your question.
Thank you. And Rob, did you want to come back on that too?
Just for those people who are not perhaps from the profession and don't have that background, the undergraduate curriculum is decided by the individual universities. There is no central curriculum. There is advice issued by the CSP and the HCPC, who are the regulator, who have to approve those individual programs. CSP is currently reviewing our advice to HEIs, so everything is currently under consideration in that regard, but it is up to the individual universities what they include in their curriculum.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, I want to bring in some more questions. Carol's posed, in fact, 2 questions, Carol. Good to see you, Carol. You asked about using the quality standards. Do you want to just pose your question to the group and see what response we get?
Yes, thank you, Dale. I'm delighted to see the discussion. The CSP has developed some quality standards for MSK care, and we went to a lot of trouble to make sure that inflammatory conditions were included in that. And it provides some really valuable standard statements across the pathway for care. And I just feel that both those quality standards and the toolkit can be a valuable mechanism to try and utilise to create a standard. So I guess I'm throwing it to Rob to see what we can do with the CSP to try and help champion those standards, and can we use them to focus on care for people with AxSpa and I guess rheumatology more generally.
Rob, did you want to respond to that?
Well, I guess I'd throw it back out. I mean, having worked with the different professional networks to develop those standards, they're there, they've been well received, they've been well promoted to the profession. I guess the question is to those of you who are thinking about designing services, thinking about designing roles, how will you use them in making sure that they are actually having that impact?
Anyone want to come in on that?
I'm just thinking, Mo, looking at your incredible pathway work that you did for community physiotherapy, it seems a really good opportunity that you could tie that in, we could somehow tie that in with the standards of care, and whether we could even map your pathway against those standards and create an AXFAR specific, and I guess a rheumatology specific way that those standards could be used. What might be just some that are really key, and also using the toolkit, thinking about how the toolkit, whether that could be a project that could happen, and bring all those things together.
Thank you. I think Amanda wanted to come in on this too. Amanda.
Yeah, I think it's important that we differentiate between the standards and the capabilities. I think the standards are a good way of enacting the capabilities. So capability is the level of practice that somebody's proven to be working at, which is really important. The standards are how to operationalise it in practice. So the standards need to be the vehicle for allowing people things like capacity in the work time to train, and to stop the culture that sits behind it all, where if somebody's a band whatever, which is just the amount of pay that they take home. Rob's smiling because he knows I always bang on about this. It doesn't tell you how capable someone is, how much money they have. It just means they're clever at interview and managed to sneak in there. So, well, it could do that. It doesn't always mean that, obviously, but it's about making sure that we have the culture right to be able to grow the clinician's capability. Because at the moment, what happens so much within the NHS is that you get employed into a role and then you're not allowed to develop because they're terrified that you're going to go off somewhere else, or you're only in that role, therefore they're not going to pay for you to go and be trained to do something different that's not within your job description. So there's something around that. So I think the standards need to be used as a vehicle to allow clinicians to be able to meet the capabilities to be safe clinicians.
Many thanks, Amanda. Carol, you raised another point, which I think I can hopefully respond to. You asked about the potential value of a consensus position statement on a standard of care for people with axial SPA, which includes consensus recommendations on physiotherapy. And I think on the back of the work we've been doing about a gold standard time to diagnosis, we are now starting to think about a project on gold standard approach to treatment in its entirety and what that might look like, and a process that would engage a range of professionals to articulate a consensus statement. So watch this space. We definitely think there's value in doing with an axial SPA. I want to now move on a little bit and talk to both Will and Carol about the capabilities framework that you developed, and ask you what kind of traction do you feel you've now had? Will, you touch on this briefly in your presentation? Do you think it's now starting to add value?
Yeah, it takes a while for things to get fully embedded, I suppose, and it feels like it is. I've been contacted by a few people who are looking at employing rheumatology physio staff, and they've used the framework to build that business case. I thought Roger's presentation was very powerful. Thanks, Roger, for that, with regards to seeing a physiotherapist who perhaps didn't say much to you and gave you one sheet of exercises and sent you on your way. And that was a number of years ago, but then you described a contemporary of yours who went down the coast and had the same experience recently. So I think probably neither of those physiotherapists necessarily thought they were bad physiotherapists, but by having a clear framework of what we'd expect and having that well publicised, we would hope would have much less of those experiences. So it will take a while, I think, for the document to show benefit longer term and actually change practice, but it will validate new roles. It also, I think, is encouraging those who are in this role already to stay in the role and look at how they can get the best support for what they're doing. Carol co-authored this with me, so I'm going to let her speak at this stage.
Thanks, Dale. I agree with Will, and we're working really hard to try and get it out there. But I think at least its existence creates an expectation that there is a standard. So if nothing else, we hope that there's an awareness that there should be a standard, and we hope they either open the pages or go a bit further. So I think that's really, really important. And that's why I think the consensus statement across all treatment, but certainly physiotherapy is really important. There's so much evidence and clinical guidance for pharmacological care, and sitting on that nice guidance where we struggle to even get wording to allow us to include hydrotherapy in the recommendation because of the way that NICE needs to work with its recommendations was really challenging for the entire committee, but we did get in there, but it was really difficult about what we could say. And I would love to see a minimum standard of care that will need to be provided by non-specialist MSK services that, you know, where it sits in the community and you're not part of rheumatology service. So I would, you know, and just having recently been seeing Mo's work and seeing that work, and everybody else is also trying to do it, that inflammatory back pain pathways and post-diagnosis care support for what a physiotherapy and other musculoskeletal services should provide as a minimum for assessments and for a minimum amount of review would be a really valuable piece of work, I think.
Thank you, Carol. And I want to bring Claire Jeffries onto the stage. Claire's posed a question which is in the chat, but maybe Claire can ask the question herself. We can bring Claire on, please. Claire Jeffries.
Sorry, Dale, we might not have Claire Jeffries just at this moment.
She was chatting about 10 seconds ago, just a minute ago. Maybe she's being shy. We'll try and track her down. In all of this, we are seeing some very positive examples of the work that physiotherapists are doing. And Mo, your presentation spoke amply to the impact in the diagnosis part, for example, that you're doing. And Lord Campbell-Sabers has a question for you, which is, tell us more about Physio Giraffe health plans.
Right, it's a programme that was developed by the physios through Glasgow Caledonian University, and it's an online bespoke individualised programme that's between the physio and the patient. And I have to say, for our AXPA patients, it's been absolutely fantastic. The patients like it. They agree to sign up to the exercise programme. The physio can then monitor their programme online. When they do the exercises, they can fill in a diary, and a compliance chart comes up. So it's a really powerful tool to show to the patients hopefully how much exercise they're doing, that they actually start to feel better, and that they're managing to self-manage. So it's a programme that we had got on trial from Giraffe. They were actually really, really helpful at trying to get it implemented through the hospital. We actually wanted to get it implemented into our community services, because that's one of the issues that I think Carol had mentioned before, that when our services were commissioned 3 years ago, we found that some of our specialist AXPA work was possibly getting treated by the same physiotherapist that would possibly treat like a sprained ankle. So we had to really, really push, which is taking a full 3-year QI programme to try and get minimum standards of care, so that our patients are getting the most appropriate, the highest quality of AXPA service. So we have just managed to get the Giraffe healthcare programme adopted by the community services as well for AXPA patients. But it's still an ongoing journey, still a long process to go as well.
Thank you very much, Mo. And we're trying to, apparently Claire Jeffries is here in the building, but we can't manage to bring her on stage. Let me just see if I can pose her question for you, for the panel. So Claire says, it's great to see so much development of standards and frameworks to help support a standard level of work for a physiotherapist working in rheumatology. Can the panel comment on how they think local physio services can champion with their MSK leadership team to ensure protected time can be allocated to develop new staff into the field of rheumatology? This is the field of practice which often gets overshadowed and not something by other training and competencies. Who wants to respond to that? Will, please.
Just one angle from me, and I kind of alluded to this in my presentation. At the moment, we don't have a recommendation for the amount of rheumatology physiotherapy staff we should have per head of population. And perhaps your rheumatologist or the rheumatology lead in a department could have a responsibility for speaking to physiotherapy into that and saying, look, we've got 5 whole-time equivalent rheumatologists here. Our population we serve is 800,000. Therefore, we would expect rheumatology physio hours of so much a week, and having a narrative along that line to see what would be the minimum requirement for specialist rheumatology physio would be very useful. And I think the rheumatology team would campaign for that as one angle to answer Claire's question.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on that question? What I'm struck with in this conversation is just how significant this workforce issue is within rheumatology. And Rob, I was just looking at your comment in the chat really about what the APPG might want to do about this, whether we actually want to write to Department of Health and Social Care or ICSs or NHS England to ask about their workforce planning arrangements. I think it would be good to share the kind of the perspectives from this conversation, and maybe Tom, if we possibly could craft some kind of letters to department and elsewhere. In fact, Tom and I will be meeting with Health Minister Gillian Keegan at some point next month, and Tom feels like this could be a very relevant question to be posing to the Minister when we meet with her. So that putting you on the spot, but it does seem to me there's a real strength of feeling about this issue of workforce, which I think we could share with the Minister and with others indeed. Are there any final comments or questions that anyone wants to ask before we move on to the final part of the meeting? No, if not, then I want to thank all of our panelists and thank all of you who's asked questions. It's been hugely appreciated, and we definitely will take your comments away and see how we can feed them into upcoming meetings. So thank you for that. Okay, the next part of the meeting is just a brief update from me on some of the work that NAS is doing that relates to work we've been doing within the APPG. I'll just share my screen. Just check that everyone can see that. People see the slides? Yeah, wonderful. Okay. One of the topics we brought to the APPG some time ago was this question of diagnostic delay. And as you'll all be aware, we launched last June our route map to achieve a gold standard of 1 year time to diagnosis. I want to share with the APPG some of the work we've been doing since we first talked about this at the parliamentary group. We last summer and autumn had the first phase of a national awareness campaign to raise awareness among a fairly cold audience who knew nothing about the condition, about the symptoms, and encouraging their swift action, including doing the online symptom checker and taking their results to primary care if the results indicated they might be suspected axial SpA. And we're launching a second iteration of our campaign in the forthcoming months. One of the discussions of the APPG has been about the lack of clinical visibility and leadership within primary care for axial SpA, and that really was a spur for us in developing a new programme called Champions in Primary Care, which will be a 2-year quality improvement and leadership programme where we want to try and cultivate and support a cadre of clinical champions in primary care who will really do a lot to raise visibility and find ways of getting early identification and referral of patients directly into rheumatology. We're also about to conduct a national review of the axial SpA training and resources available for secondary care providers who we know are very important here but often know very little about axial SpA. We're also concerned by the question of pathways from primary care to rheumatology, and indeed this question of internal referrals, which from my mind seems bizarre that someone goes to an eye clinic and has to be referred back to the GP before going back to the rheumatology department, and we're going to be exploring that imminently. And likewise, we're also in the middle of commissioning a national review of axial SpA training for radiologists, which is a clear concern also. And in a few months' time, we'll be going out inviting expressions of interest to work with NAS in creating an integrated pilot with a series of interrelated interventions that follows that person from the moment of first symptom onset into their diagnosis in rheumatology, and tries to create a complex set of interrelated interventions to smooth that pathway. And we will welcome in due course conversations with NHS organisations who want to be involved in some further conversation and co-design about all of that. I do want to bring to your attention results some of you will have seen this last week. We commissioned the University of East Anglia to ask the question, what does delayed diagnosis cost? Cost in terms of lost productivity, cost in terms of out-of-pocket expenses, and cost to the NHS. And the stark conclusion of their economic modelling is that for a person whose symptoms start at the age of 26, with an average time to diagnosis of 8.5 years, the cumulative cost for that one individual is a staggering £196,000. And in about 6 weeks from now, we'll be presenting the second and final part of this study, which will show what the total cost is for the UK economy overall at aggregate global level. And it will be, I suspect, a very stark figure that we'll want to be using and be sharing that with parliamentarians, including the Minister and others. So I think a very significant part of the jigsaw puzzle we haven't had before. We now know what the costs of delayed diagnosis are overall. Mo talked about her experience in the Aspiring to Excellence programme and the practical tools that it gives clinicians to help them drive improvement. And you saw in her presentation how it improved referrals from 80% to 100%, the work that she and colleagues at Newcastle have been doing. Since our last meeting with APPG, we have published our first report on the programme. And what it showed is that even in the context of a pandemic, when clinicians were clearly focused elsewhere, having a structured educational program teaching practical quality improvement tools help clinicians to stay engaged and indeed help them in many instances actually make improvements to their care and improvements to patient outcomes as a consequence. And out of that program now we have a whole new set of new resources for clinicians to help them in their service improvement, including our new podcast series, Room for Improvement, which you can now subscribe to. And finally, some of you will know that our deadline is for tomorrow for applicants for our Primary Care Champions programme and for our further iteration of the Aspiring to Excellence programme, which will really focus in on diagnostic delay. The last thing I'll mention, Tom, is obviously hydrotherapy has been an important part of the APPG's work, and you and I met with the Minister some time ago to talk about that. And I'm delighted to say there's been a multi-organisation alliance formed of organisations across conditions, really, both patient organisations and professional bodies who want to work together to really make the case for hydrotherapy as a core part of provision within the NHS. I'm delighted that some of you who have joined this evening are part of that alliance. So that's all that I want to say, and I'll just stop sharing my screen. And Tom, it's back to you.
Okay, thanks, Dale, and thank you everyone for coming this evening. I sort of get the job of wrapping this meeting up, but I feel sort of underqualified to do that, having heard such a range of interesting and insightful discussion and presentations from clinicians, from practitioners, and from patients as well. And I think that's what makes these meetings always so interesting and so varied. I think from me, it's been a really interesting discussion. So thank you all for coming. As Dale was saying, from a parliamentary side, we'll be still sort of keeping up the pressure on things, hopefully getting a meeting very shortly with the Minister to talk about some of the issues we've been talking about delayed diagnosis and making sure that the issues that we've been discussing this evening are on ministers in tray. So we'll be keeping that going forwards. I think in terms of this meeting, the minutes will be shared with attendees in the next couple of weeks. But until then, I think it just leaves for me to say thank you once again to everyone for coming. Thank you to everyone who gave a presentation today. And thank you for all those of you who participated in the group discussion as well. It's been lovely to see you, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you.